In the Bible, Israel is regarded as God's covenant people, going with his covenant and being protected by him. There are prophecies regarding Israel in the last days which are coming to pass. What are these prophecies, and what's their significance for Israel and the world? Watch this video till the end to find out. Israel, a Middle Eastern country located on the Mediterranean Sea, is regarded as the biblical Holy Land by Christians, Muslims, and Jews. Its capital, Jerusalem, holds most of its holy sites like the Temple Mount, Old City, Western Wall, and Mount Zion, among others. In Judaism and Christianity, Israel is known as the Holy Land, and Jerusalem a holy city. According to them, it's the place that holds the core of their faith, where it began. For Christians, it's the place where the life and death of Jesus unfolded. With its significance level, it's no surprise to anyone the prophecies surrounding them in the Holy Book. According to the Holy Book, as the world ends, some prophecies concerning Israel are expected to come to pass to signify the second coming of Jesus. Some of these prophecies are beginning to come to pass. What are these signs, and what do they represent? Rebuilding of the Temple. The Bible speaks of the first temple, known as Solomon's Temple. The temple, built by King Solomon to honor God, was built on the site of the present-day Temple Mount in Jerusalem. It existed between the 10th and 6th centuries BC. The temple was destroyed during the siege laid on Jerusalem by Babylon during the reign of King Nebuchadnezzar. After the destruction of the first temple, Solomon's Temple, the second temple, later known as Herod's Temple, was constructed. It was built after the Israelites returned from their exile in Babylon. They'd initially built a modest place of worship. Still, it was redesigned and reconstructed into its original structure with giant walls and big columns when King Herod the Great ruled over Judea. After its recreation, it stood for over 580 years before the Romans again destroyed it during the Roman invasion of Jerusalem. Building the third temple was put forward when the second temple was destroyed. The third temple was to succeed the first and second and be a sacred place of worship for the Jews. The third temple is also significant to the beginning of the Messianic age, but building it seems not simple. Israel cannot seem to lay claim on the land where the previous temples were said to be built. Each time Israel tries to lay any claim on any part of Jerusalem, they're met by opposition from far and wide. Their capital, Jerusalem, is shared with Palestine, and some countries recognize West Jerusalem as the capital of Israel and its east as the capital of Palestine. The Muslims discourage building a third temple as it's the site of the Dome of Rock, an Islamic monument to the Temple Mount Center. Jewish visitors are discouraged from visiting the complex, and Jews are prevented from worshipping there. Some scholars also have reason to believe, against the Jews' long-standing belief, that no previous Jewish temples were built there. In response to this claim, researchers and scholars performed more research and discovered that the Al-Aqsa Mosque was built on a Jewish ritual cleansing site. Proof of this was provided by British archaeologist Robert Hamilton. He wrote a paper detailing his work, including his investigations of the mosque foundations and what he found. He achieved this after an earthquake shook the mosque, dilapidating a part of it in 1927. He discovered a mikveh, a bath used in Judaism for ritual immersion to achieve purity, underneath the mosque's floor. The mikveh is considered so important to Judaism that it's usually built even before the construction of the temple or synagogue and should be connected to a natural water source, making it living water. It was used during the time of the Second Temple and was used for immersion before gaining access to the Temple Mount. These discoveries were made some centuries ago, but were confiscated by the British Mandate Archives to prevent upsetting Islamic officials until recently. And now that it's been proven that the previous Jewish temples were built where the current temple sits, the Sanhedrin, which sits as a tribunal for the Jews, has started taking steps for the Jewish temple services to begin soon. Even the farmland and forests are being cultivated to provide for the needs of the temple upon construction. The Sanhedrin claim although people believe that the sacrifices made in the temple are from the blood and ashes of animals, they attested that the plants grown around the temple and Israel were also used in these sacrifices. Parts of the requirements of rebuilding the temple includes producing a red heifer. To purify the Jews to enable them to take part in temple services, the ashes of the red heifer are kneaded and mixed with water. Rabbi Chaim Richman, a rabbi in Israel and the international director of the Temple Institute from 1989 to 2020, has been highly invested in bringing back the red heifer without blemish to Israel, as is written in Numbers 19. It was easy for the red heifers to go extinct, as only 9 red heifers were used to purify the Jews between the first and second temples, amounting to about 1,000 years. The heifers are burnt whole, and their ashes are stored cleanly and gradually mixed with water. With the guidance and supervision of Rabbi Chaim Richman and other rabbis from the Temple Institute, a knowledgeable cattle farmer who understood the concept of animal husbandry attempted to produce a red heifer. They implanted the frozen embryos of North America's red Angus into Israel's domestic cattle. More is needed for the red heifer to be made available. There are specific rules regarding its breeding. It had to be born in Israel without blemish. It must also have yet to be attached to a yoke for plowing. To find out about this, lots of old texts were studied and paired with modern scientific technology to produce results. In addition, Kohanim, a form of priesthood, are made to go through temple ceremonies held by the Sanhedrin and the temple movement to train them on their actions and mannerisms. They're also trained in using the types of equipment of the new temple and offering burnt offerings. The new altar can only be built at the site of the original altar atop the Temple Mount. The altar was built uniquely so that it could be quickly dismantled and reassembled in another location. Once rebuilt at its permanent position on the Temple Mount, it can once again be used to offer sacrifices. Orthodox Jews believe that rebuilding the temple is the only solution to the problems faced by the Jewish people and the world. As preparations are being made for the rebuilding of the temple, it's worth noting that the control of the mount lies with the Muslims, and action must be taken to recover it. For Jewish access to be granted, rather than legal action, political action is needed. In its ruling concerning the work being done, Israel's Judicial Council said that due to the situation's complexity, the decision was beyond the boundaries of the law, and there was more reasonable ways to decide the case than a legal ruling. According to the Bible and in an understanding of Daniel's prophecy, it can be said that the Antichrist in Revelation 13 is the future political leader that would make a covenant with the Jewish leaders to rebuild the Third Temple. International or regional organizations, states, or countries might step in as mediators. Still, we can all agree that if it would be settled, the cooperation of leaders of different faiths must be had. In doing this, the proposal of the Antichrist making the rebuilding a reality might be valid, as both religious and political leaders would follow him. As we watch and await the second coming of Jesus, we also watch the unfolding of these events regarding the building of the Third Temple. Messiah at Siloam Pool. King Hezekiah built the Siloam Pool, or the Pool of Siloam, in the 8th century BC. It was the only source of fresh water in ancient Jerusalem. The pool was built so Jerusalem would always have water, even if it were besieged by attackers in war. King Hezekiah cut through about 2,000 feet of solid rock from Gihon Spring. The spring produced water twice a day, and the water flowed from Gihon Spring to the pool. The original Pool of Siloam was about 53 feet long, 18 feet wide, and 19 feet deep, and was made of part hewn rock and part masonry. When the Babylonians destroyed Jerusalem, the Pool of Siloam was also destroyed. It wasn't until 70 years later when Nehemiah rebuilt the walls of Jerusalem and repaired the walls of the Pool of Siloam. When Herod the Great began to rule, he rebuilt and expanded the pool, and the poor and sick would come to bathe at the pool. The water from the pool was used for a special ceremony during the Feast of Tabernacles because it was close to the temple. In Israel, important events are remembered with feasts. To remind the Israelis of their freedom from Egypt, the Lord instructed them in Leviticus 23 verses 34 to 43 to reserve 7 days to the Lord for the Feast of Tabernacles or the Feast of Booths, from the 15th day of the 7th month. They were to dwell in booths for the 7 days, all native-born Israelis, that their generations may know that they dwelled in booths when he brought them out of the land of Egypt. The Festival of Booths, also known as Sukkot, served as a remembrance of how God saved his people from the land of Egypt and provided them with food in the wilderness. The Mishnah contains directions on how to build the booths to dwell in during the holidays. The festival usually came at a time when the harvest had been completed. People give thanks to God while hoping for better rains. Leviticus 23 verse 40 talks about gathering 3 branches and fruit. The rabbis agree that the citron fits the fruit requirement, and willows, myrtles, and palms can be used as branches. Burnt and sin offerings are also additional commandments to follow during the Feast of Tabernacles, Sukkot. During the feast, before the morning sacrifice, a priest would take a golden pitcher to the pool of Siloam, fill it with water, and bring it back to the altar amid the shouts of the people. Then, as the crowd chanted Psalms 113 to 118, he poured out the water on the west side of the altar. Doing this, they portrayed Isaiah 12, verse 3. The pool of Siloam was hidden for a long time until it was discovered in 2004 while digging a sewer line. Of its 53 feet length, only a tiny portion has been revealed so far. It's believed that in the future, all people will gather in Jerusalem to worship the Messiah. Jesus also used Sukkot to explain the necessity of the Holy Spirit. On the most fantastic festival day, the last day, Jesus said that anyone thirsty should come to him and drink, and whoever believed in him would have rivers of living water flowing from within them. Jesus filled the gap and offered water, the Holy Spirit, better than Siloam's waters. By offering the water of life, Jesus identified himself with the rock in the wilderness that gave water to the Jews. Armageddon. Hearing Armageddon, you instantly think of the end of the world scenarios, and you're not entirely wrong. It refers to the time when the government of humans comes to an end. It's when the people and governments who've not accepted the sovereignty of the Lord come together and battle against him. In the New Testament, Armageddon's only mentioned once in Revelation 16, verse 16. The word was used to refer to a place where armies would gather for battle, and various people have interpreted it as either literal or symbolic. It's where the armies of the government of the earth would gather to battle the Lord and his hosts. Once tempted to ask who would try to battle with the Lord and where the battle would occur. According to the scriptures, people who can't accept his sovereignty, people who do not believe in his authority and hold him in contempt, are his enemies and would battle against him. Israel, the land of God's covenant people, is located in the Middle East, and Mount Megiddo, which people have assigned the literal meaning for Armageddon, is located in northern Israel. Does this mean the Battle of Armageddon would take place in the Middle East or another region? No, this isn't true. The books of Jeremiah and Ezekiel say otherwise. The Battle of Armageddon would not be a single place, but from nation to nation, all over the world. It would consist of various nations coming together to battle against God for the final time, rebelling against his authority and dominion. Armageddon translates to Har Megiddo in Hebrew, meaning Mountain of Megiddo. The area is located in northern Israel and has been the site of various battles in history, some of which are recorded in the Bible. The entire Megiddo isn't a mountain, but a tall rise in the land caused by people living, rebuilding, and building in the same spot. This space or landmass is insufficient to contain the host of people that would gather to fight in the Battle of Armageddon. When Armageddon starts, according to Job, Habakkuk, Ezekiel, and Zechariah, we can expect that God will use the weapons he's once used before to show his sovereignty. Earthquakes, floods, hails, landslides, thunderstorms, illnesses, wildfires, and lightning, among others, are weapons that God uses to battle. As a result of the ensuing chaos, The enemies of God might end up killing each other till they realize that God is the Almighty, the one they should fear, as is written in Zechariah 14:13 and Ezekiel 38:21-23. Earth is man's eternal home. Armageddon does not signify the world's end. Many of God's followers would survive Armageddon and live on the earth. This is emphasized in Revelation 7 verses 9-14. So when you next hear that Armageddon would be the end of the world, know that we don't mean the end of the earth, but the end of man's dominion and their God-hating practices and activities. No one knows when the world will end or when the battle will be, but with God, all we can do is rely on Him to lead and help us through it. To get more videos like this, like the video and subscribe to this channel.